Welcome back. Still watching Business Morning live on Channels Television. Now for the commodities market update, we have Desola Simone now joining us right there from Reading. Great to have you, Desola. So it's still inflation. Well, we're still talking inflation. We're talking about inflation the whole of 2022, and it's still the major topic now. And the rate hikes have come, but we're still seeing inflation trend upward. And your next prediction for next inflation is that it's going to go even higher.
Indeed, Iladi, yes, thank you. So the National Bureau of Statistics is scheduled to release the inflation numbers for September on the 15th of this month. We forecast that inflation is going to trend upward by about 0.4 percentage points to 20.9%, up from 20.5% in September. And this is driven by the usual factors. One is the exchange rate pressures. Two is the higher cost of logistics. For example, if you look at the prices of diesel, that has remained elevated. At the start of the year, it was around 300 naira per liter. Currently, it's around 700 to 800 naira per liter, depending on where you go. So we forecast, and in addition to that, we're also, one of the key drivers is also going to be the persistent and supply chain disruptions. But I think what is important to notice is that the rate of increase is slowing down. So the pace of increase in headline inflation is slowing down about 0.4% this month. And this could mean that, maybe this could mean that, inflation is slowing down, and we could see inflation reach a point of inflection in the coming months. If you look at other sub-indices, look at core inflation, we forecast core inflation to also trend upwards, as well as food inflation. But on a month-on-month basis, our forecast shows headline inflation is lower on a month-on-month basis. And this is mainly driven by, I think, partly driven by harvest, the effect of harvest, as well as price resistance.
Are the rate hikes kicking in at this point?
Not yet, Ladi. Partly, so if you look at the inflation for Nigeria, I think there are many factors that are affecting it. One is that we're in an election cycle, right? So that is also going to drive inflation going forward. While, the rate hikes, currently yet today, I think about 400 basis points, while that might have some effect, we are still seeing exchange rate pressures, we are still seeing exchange rate pressures. We are still seeing what is it now? Higher energy costs, logistic costs. All of these costs are it's going to be like a tussle of war, and I think that those costs will still keep inflation elevated. However, I think after the election, around H1 next year, yes, we should begin to see inflation really trend downwards.
Yeah, that'll be great to see, because I saw a forecast from an expert in the U.S. They're actually predicting that next year U.S. inflation is also gonna, come down, and they also advise, the Fed to make the next Fed meeting, the rate hike should be the last one that they will do, so that they can actually get what's actually going to happen next year. But do you see these rate hikes actually stopping anytime soon? And also bringing it down here to Nigeria, the MPC too, it says they're going to keep raising, if that's what it takes. You see them stopping at any point?
So we are in a tightening cycle, right? I think that's the first thing to just notice. We're in a tightening cycle globally. And I think in the United States, we are beginning to see inflation, and also in the UK, we are beginning to see inflation reduce slightly. For the month of August, inflation reduced by 0.2%, both in the UK and in the US. And I think that's partly due to the aggressive hikes in interest rates. In the last meeting last month, the US Fed increased interest rates by around 75 basis points. And this was the third consecutive increase this year. In the UK also, we saw an increase by 50 basis points. So I think that, and also the US Fed has said that they're going to be quite aggressive. They are going to do what it takes. If you look at these countries, like the inflation in these countries currently is around, in the UK, is around 9.9%, and in the US is about 8.5%. But if you look at their long-run expectations, like it's around 2%. So I think it is. You can expect some more aggressive increases in interest rates until inflation is closer to to the to the long-run inflation expectation of around 2%. In Nigeria, also, like you said, we saw 150 basis points increase at the last meeting, and that brings cumulatively 400 basis points. I do not expect that the MPC is going to increase interest rates any further this year. But I think if inflation does not change, and if inflation does not trend downwards, I think in next year, perhaps after the election, we might still see some tightening in Nigeria.
Right, it'd be great to see the tightening actually end at some point, hopefully next year. But now let's look at the oil market. Now we're seeing, prices trend upward this morning, and obviously it's all about the OPEC meeting tomorrow. How are you seeing it?
So what's happening really is, before now, let me just give some background. Before now, we saw prices drop quite sharply, mainly due to the tightening cycle, which raised concerns about a recession. We saw also lockdowns in China, which also raised concerns about global economic growth as well as oil demand growth. And in the middle of all of this, we saw this dollar really strengthening against the basket of currencies. And usually when this happens, it makes dollar-denominated commodities are more expensive to holders of these other currencies, so that affects demand. So in the previous weeks, we saw a lot of demand side factors, driving oil prices, and we saw oil prices decline quite sharply. I mean, oil price currently around $88 per barrel. But last week, there were some rumors that OPEC is likely to to cut production by around 1 million barrels per day. I mean, when I read that, I thought OPEC is barely meeting its production quota. I mean, last month, OPEC Plus missed production quota by around 3.6 million barrels per day, and now they want to cut. But the idea is two main reasons, right? One reason is to support prices, because prices has been quite declining quite sharply. But also another reason could be to bring the production closer to the targets, right? So it is not so that they are not missing the production targets by much. So the expectation is that OPEC is going to actually agree. That is the expectation, that they're going to agree to cut production by around 1 million barrels per day. I think that's going to support prices going forward.
Right, and talking about the production cut there, looking at Nigeria, we're not actually meeting the target. So how does that even impact us in any way?
I think this is not going to be good for Nigeria. First, I was looking at the numbers for last month, for September. Nigeria produced less than 1 million barrels of oil per day. And Nigeria's target is around 1.8 million barrels per day. I mean, we know the usual factors that are responsible for that. But I think that there will still be a little bit of room for Nigeria to increase its production. But definitely Nigeria is not going to be happy with it. But I think there will be room. I don't think Nigeria's new production quota would be small. I don't think it will be small. I think it will just be marginally lower than what it was before, or even at the same level as it was before.
And we see the naira taking a beating again in the parallel market, and obviously election campaigns are kicking off at this point. What can we expect for the naira at the end of the year?
That's a tough question, Ladi.
Yeah.
But let me give you some. Let's look at what's happening. So currently, Ladi, the price, the naira is around, I think, at the official market is around 430 naira to the dollar, but the black market is around 730 to 740. So you see there's a big gap there. One of the factors, Ladi, let's look at the supply side. We are seeing higher oil prices, right? But like I mentioned earlier, Nigeria has been unable to take advantage of the higher oil price environment due to vandalism of oil infrastructure, oil theft. I mean, many oil companies, many IOCs have declared a force majeure on many of their export terminals, and that contributes to Nigeria's lower oil production and lower oil revenues. So that's on one hand, lower oil production, lower oil revenues. On the other hand, Nigeria's subsidies, as you know, we are in the high oil price environment. The subsidy also is higher. That is the gap between the imported, the landing cost of PMS and the gap between the landing cost of PMS and the pump price becomes larger as the price of oil in the global markets rises. So Nigeria's import bill becomes larger. So the revenue that accrues to the government from exporting oil is even smaller. In addition to that, hot money, foreign portfolio investment used to be one of Nigeria's big source of foreign exchange earnings, but now because of quite aggressive hike in interest rates globally, as well as the tighter financial conditions globally, the foreign portfolio investment is drying up, for lack of a better word. Similarly, foreign direct investment, we are seeing a decline in foreign direct investment. So as all of this is happening, on the demand side, demand is not reducing. I mean, we just finished this season, August and September was like school fees season. A lot of Nigerians moving abroad, even more than the usual average. I looked at some numbers from the UK the other day. As at June this year, the UK had issued around 65,000 visas for international students from Nigeria. To give you context, last year was around 8,000, right? So all of those people are going to need dollars to pay for their school fees. So there's huge demand for FX to pay for school fees, and that's just the UK, right? We also have huge demand for manufacturers preparing also for December, and so all of these factors are mounting pressure on the exchange rate and the external reserve. Now, in addition to all of this, we are in an election season, right? So there's also demand for campaign and all of that stuff. So while, as the school fees season has kind of passed, I estimate that, the naira will strengthen a little bit, but we are going into another season of high demand in anticipation of the festive season, Christmas, but also the election. So I think the naira is still going to be quite volatile, taking into consideration that our exports, our dollar inflows is not increasing remarkably. I mean, also there's news that, the federal government is considering to reopen this Trans-Niger export terminal. If it opens that and is able to export, I think around 180,000 barrels per day, I think that would help with the FX inflows into the country.
Right, we need more demand for the naira at this point. All right, let's look at the agricultural market now. We see cocoa, we're seeing the output is not looking so good for 2022-2023. What's happening there?
So I think the big idea for Nigeria was excessive rainfall in southwest Nigeria. And what happens is with the excessive rainfall, it significantly increases the moisture of the soil, which becomes conducive for this black pod disease, which is a disease that ravages cocoa harvest. And that is what is happening. So in addition to that, we are also seeing, because of the excessive rainfall, the cocoa farmers are unable to get enough sunshine to dry their cocoa, their cocoa harvest, which also affects the quantity, the size of the pod, but also the quantity. And that is why we are seeing lower output from southwest Nigeria. But on the other hand, we are seeing big harvests coming out of Ivory Coast and Ghana. So what's happening is the huge harvest coming out of Ivory Coast and Ghana is kind of outweighing the lower exports from Nigeria. And that is why we are seeing that globally, the price of cocoa is trending downwards.
Right, I guess there'll be pressure on price with this output issue there. Thank you so much, Desola Simone. That's our FDC analyst there, right there. Join us from Red News. Great having you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a moment now.